take what you made last year. Say it equals $100 an hour. You look at all your tasks there and it's like, okay, if I can get somebody else to do some of my tasks for $50 an hour, then you can do that. And it's actually going to elevate your income because now you're delegating some of the other things. You can pay up to $50, pay half of what you really make. It buys back that time, which is going to make you a $200 an hour person now because you get to do the important stuff.
I think you just brought up like a great point. Write down the things that you do not want to do, because there's someone else who's good at them. So take a look at what are the administrative tasks that maybe you could be out selling or having conversations, or as you mentioned, doing the $200 an hour work while the other person is doing the $50 an hour.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Eat, Sleep, and Invest. I'm your host, Brian Driscoll, and I'm here with Jessica Eberley. What's going on, Jess?
Hello. Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me on today.
Thanks for coming on. So Jess is up here in Pittsburgh. Jess and I are actually related. Right, Jess?
Yes.
So give everyone a little background. Like, how'd you get into your space? What do you do? And all that good stuff.
Absolutely. So my name's Jessica Eberley. I'm the owner and CEO of HRT Solutions and Equality Careers. And in 2016, I actually launched my business. At the time, it was myself and a team of 4. And now it's myself and a team of over 25. And so essentially the reason why I started my business is because I'd worked with a lot of different recruiting teams and recruiting staffing agencies. And I thought to myself, how can we do this? And how can we do this a little bit different and a little bit better? And so started as an RPO, recruitment process outsourcing, and really working as a partner to organizations. It's very important for us to know and understand the culture of the organization. And then after we got rolling with the recruiting piece, my background is also in human resources. So in addition to helping organizations recruit, we also help organizations get started with human resources. And so a lot of times people start a business, they don't know a lot about HR, and that's where we kind of can help to fill in the gaps.
Yeah. So, and this is interesting. I'll tell you guys a story. So everyone knows I'm in real estate. I have rental properties, and a story, which I'm going to relate to this in a minute. I used to rent out my own properties. And I remember this one lady came to our property and she had crappy credit. And she's like, and she talked me into renting to her. I'm like, you know what? Just don't screw me over. Turns out 6 months later, we had a crappy property. She didn't pay her rent and it sucked. What I did was to fix that problem, I put a property manager in place. And now when I'm renting to people, I no longer have to talk to them. It takes the emotion out. I get to see their credit. I get to see their background, things like that. The same thing happened in business. I was hiring people and I'd hire the wrong people. So I started working with Jess, and Jess is like my property manager for employees. Basically, in my case, because I'm like a helper and I like helping people and just talking to people. In this case, Jess allows me to tell them what we want, like what the ideal thing is, what our business does. And she goes out and finds all the people and then only brings me back the top 3 or 4. So Jess, elaborate on that, like how you guys work, because that worked really well for me. It takes the emotion out of it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I mentioned, it's so important for us to know and understand what the organization's culture looks like and kind of what the objectives are and how people fit into that piece. And so typically what we do is we go out, we cast a broad net, we have our tools that we use. They're often tools that most business owners probably wouldn't have, like LinkedIn recruiter seats, Indeed resume search, ZipRecruiter, all of those things. So oftentimes when you're looking for a candidate, if you're a small business owner, you're posting, you're seeing what comes back. When you work with our team, what we do is we post, and then we also do sourcing. So we will reach out to candidates that we see on LinkedIn, that we see in Indeed, that we feel like are a great fit for your organization. And then the reason why it's so important that we know and understand your culture is we want to make sure that when we're talking to candidates, if somebody doesn't seem like they would be a great fit for your organization, maybe you're a startup and you need to move quickly. And this is someone who has maybe worked in the same job, wants to work, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. There is a job out there for them, but that may not be the startup organization. So we go through, we do the screening, we make sure that the person seems like they would be a good fit before we're passing them along. And we also save a ton of time for the business owner. So we were working at one point on some roles that were actually for a grounds crew at a country club. And one of the ways that we save them a ton of time is there were a lot of what we will call we call them ghosts. So people that don't show up, don't return a call. And so we were able to weed those people out so that he was only returning to his desk to have phone calls or to meet with people that were going to show up versus making a bunch of calls, going through Craigslist, doing those things. So it's really important to us that we provide value and that we also add time back to our clients and small business owners.
And that's huge too, because I remember I posted jobs on Indeed before. I'd get like 500 applications. They're like people applying. It's like, what do you even do with that? Like, I can't go through that. But you guys have processes to be able to like handle all that.
Well, and the thing is, we see two different ways. So in the marketing area, a lot of times you'll see a lot of applications, and then we have others that work within engineering and we'll see no applications. And so sometimes it's one way or the other. And sometimes it's like, hey, I don't have time to go through all these applications. Or sometimes it's like, I got 3 applications and absolutely none of them are a fit. So we either help you bump up your application and your candidate pool through sourcing and through some of our tools, or we're able to say, okay, let's post this, let's see what we get. And then we can filter through, do the resume review. We're pretty quick at it because we do it all the time. Similar to when you're looking through, some of the real estate stuff, you're like super quick to look at it, where it would take me forever to take a look.
How do you enjoy doing this, like this type of work?
I've been doing it for a while. So I think the thing is, at the end of the day, one of the things that I talk to my team about a lot is the fact that we have the opportunity, as you're going through and you're reviewing a resume, it might be like, okay, I'm reviewing a resume, or I'm posting a job, or I'm writing a policy. But when you take a look at the end of the day and you realize that you've gotten the opportunity to place someone within an organization and essentially change their life, that's where the value comes in. So we had an organization that came to us and said, we need to hire 120 people in 90 days. Can you help us? And so we got our team together. We were able, and this was across the United States. We came together. We were able to execute the 120 people in 90 days. And they were a variety of roles and a variety of states, some of them in weird spots. But when you take a look back and you realize that there were 120 people that you were able to impact their life in a positive way, give them a great opportunity, that's the part that makes it so rewarding.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I never thought about it that way. Okay, so that makes sense.
I mean, I've had people that have cried on the phone when I've made them a job offer because they're so excited about it. They're so excited about their next step. And we're very fortunate too. A lot of the companies that we work with, they're incredible. They're great brands. They're good people. And they're often giving opportunities. Like when we work with startups, one of the things that's cool is that you may be able to give someone an opportunity that they wouldn't be able to get in a corporation. So if you think about it, they may be a jack of all trades wearing a lot of different hats, and they may not be able to get that if they're pigeonholed into one particular role at a corporation.
So let's switch directions a little bit. Let's talk about the one-man show, the guy that's out there hustling in real estate or even with any industry, but the guy that's flipping houses. He's successful and he's doing everything himself. And the number one question everyone's got is like, oh yeah, I'm not ready yet. Like, how do I know when I'm ready? Like, what would you tell that person?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we have, business owners that are, just getting started, a lot of time, or not even just getting started, but they've kind of gotten to the point where they're at that, I'm working 50, 60, 70 hours per week, but they often feel like, okay, I don't want to give any of this up, or I'm the only person that can do that. A lot of times that's when it's important to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what could I get off of my plate? And so one of the things and kind of one of the things that we did even when we first started, and it's still something that we do now, sometimes it's helpful to even hire a part-time person. So when we first started, 2 individuals were stay-at-home moms who had returned to work. They were incredibly valuable, super knowledgeable, but we're looking for something with a little bit more flexibility. So that's one spot that you can look to say, maybe I don't have 40 hours that I can give to someone, but I do have 25 or I do have 30. So that can be a spot that you're getting this incredible talent. You're able to give them some flexibility and bring them on. The other question that we get a ton is, I don't know if I'm ready. So you're never going to be ready. If you consistently think about it, if you're killing yourself, you're losing out on deals, you're losing out on sales. And so that's when it's kind of like, hey, you're never going to be ready. I typically tell people, and sometimes we even help people work through this piece. We'll take a look at, what do the financials look like? How long would you be able to sustain this person? What if your business dips? Do you have to wait 6 months and continue to save money so that you have the money in the bank? And taking a look at some of those pieces. Or you can take a look at some, kind of flexible options. So as I mentioned, you could hire someone on part-time. The other thing that you can also do is you can hire someone through like a contingent labor. So a Kelly Services, there's a place called Kalos that's in Pittsburgh. You can certainly hire someone that way and do kind of like a hybrid there. So then that way you don't have to get started with setting up your payroll and your unemployment and all of those things. They can take care of those for you on the front end. So there are definitely creative ways that you can bring someone on to help without having to officially bring them on. Or as I mentioned, you're never going to be ready. So sometimes it's best to just kind of jump in.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. Just like rip off the Band-Aid. I kind of look at it too. It's like take what you made last year. Say you made, I don't know how many hours in the year, but say it equals $100 an hour. Say your average is $100 an hour you make. You look at all your tasks there and it's like, okay, if I can get somebody else to do some of my tasks for $50 an hour, then you can do that. And it's actually going to elevate your income because now you're delegating some of the other things. You can pay up to $50, pay half of what you really make. It buys back that time, which is going to make you a $200 an hour person now because you get to do the important stuff. So it's like,
I think you just brought up like a great point. Write down the things that you do not want to do because there's someone else who's good at them. So there's certainly things that I always think about. And I'm like, okay, I'm not really good at this. One of them is working in QuickBooks. I'm like good at reviewing all of the information. I'm not good at inputting it. And that's something that we offboard. So take a look at, what are the administrative tasks that, maybe you could be outselling or having conversations, or as you mentioned, doing the $200 an hour work while the other person is doing the $50 an hour work.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. I actually do it. I look at it like an energy. It's like I'll take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. It's like some things give me energy. Like I like building things. I like coming up with ideas. I don't like managing. I don't like doing books. And put the stuff on the other side. It's like Dan Martell's book actually has this about like energy audit. Put all this stuff, it takes your energy away. Like I could do our QuickBooks all day and I'd be beat at the end.
Yeah.
And pay someone else to do that stuff and only do the stuff that gives you energy and you're really good at.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And as a business owner, you usually know what you're good at. So it's like, that's pretty easy you had great advice to write that down and kind of put that into a kind of bucket that. And then the other thing too is figure out like, okay, what does my job description look like? And then hiring a person that's flexible. So for a startup, a smaller company, hiring people that are able to do things like that, they're not just going to be pigeonholed into one thing. So if you're hiring somebody that can do your books, can they also do payroll? Can they also, take a look at maybe even a presentation? And if they can't, that's okay too. But figuring out, okay, do I have somebody we always call them like utility players. Can they do multiple different things? The other thing that I always suggest for small business owners too is, I'm sure you've heard it multiple times, but fail fast. Same thing goes with having someone on your team. If you don't have the right fit on the team, oftentimes because the teams are so small, it has a huge impact. So sometimes you do have to make a decision pretty quickly to kind of, change seats. So that's part of the reason why it's so important to get the right people in the right seats and go through the hiring piece and making sure that you're kind of vetting those people correctly. We often will find people that will say like, okay, well, I just hired Betty because she's my, cousin's, sister-in-law's friend. And so sometimes it's like, just because that person is there doesn't always mean that they're the right person. And so you want to make sure that you go through that process with anyone, regardless of if they're a referral, because it's so important to get the right people in the right seats.
Yeah, and I agree. Like, obviously, we work with you. We've hired 6 or 7 people through you guys. And the experience is just awesome. It's like you work with us on coming up with a job description. Basically, talking like, here's what we're looking for. But then you make it into a proper format that's presentable. And then you guys vet them. And then they come on, we only interview a couple people, and all the people that came on, it's weird because they're all like, I don't want to say the same, but the cult, like their personality, they jive really well with what we do, which is crazy. I don't know how you guys do it. So kudos there.
Well, I always say we'll knock on wood for the next group of people that we hire too. But that's why it's so important to do the intakes and know and understand, the personality of, if it's a small business, the business owner or the hiring manager. And then, as we kind of go down the road, we oftentimes too know, what are the KPIs of the business? What are some of the goals of the business? And then how can the people that we're hiring help you get there? Because it's just so incredibly important.
Yeah. Now, how about, okay, so we got the guy that's just a one-man show hustling, trying to turn into a company. How about the guy that has a couple of people on his team, but he's trying to grow out an actual team? Like, what kind of tips do you have for them? Like the guys that, I guess we could break it into, we got the hustle startup guy. Then we got the guy that's not really a company yet. He's kind of self-employed with a couple of people working with him, trying to grow into a company.
I think one of the things, the very first thing to do is to take a look at the talent that you currently have. So as mentioned, it's figuring out what hats could this person wear? What could they do differently? If they're opening up another role that's maybe not entry level, but manager, first question is, do I have someone that's on my current team that could do this or that could take on more? So I think it's always really important to take a look at the inside of the organization first to make sure that you're not overlooking talent, especially because sometimes if you're growing to be a team of like 20 or 30, those opportunities don't become available super often. So taking a look first at who do I have internally that I feel like could potentially do more or do something different. And then at that point, go to make the determination of, okay, now what do my needs look like? And oftentimes I say, try to take a look at that 6 month to 1 year span of what can we afford? Who do we need? And what are they doing? And so at that point, it's important to kind of write out, what does the org chart look like? And I know for myself as a business owner, when we hit about 16 or 17 people, I took a look at my org chart and like 16 or 17 people were all reporting to me. And that was when I was like, okay, this is not working. And so, it's not fair to have that many people reporting to one person. And so then we kind of branched out and put in a management layer there. My management team is absolutely incredible. And then also put a layer of, senior recruiters or senior advisors in as well. So I'd say take a look, first of all, at what is the team that you have, and then take a look at, what are the roles that you need, and then start to fill them. The other thing too is if you have a manager role and someone that would be reporting to them and you're trying to fill both, I generally say try to hire the manager first and let them be a part of the hiring decision. I also think where you can include your team that it's appropriate, you may want to include them in the interview process as well, even if it's just one person to get kind of an additional opinion.
Yeah, that's a good tip too, especially like looking inward, because everyone's like, oh yeah, I got to hire someone. It's like, hey, maybe you have someone that's 80% trained for that position already, and you can move them up and then hire someone underneath them.
Well, and just even asking them, is this something that you're interested in doing? Is it something that we can provide training on? There are a lot of resources out there too that you can get that are free or cheap, whether it be, small business resources, training and development resources, marketing resources. Pittsburgh is an awesome spot for a lot of those things through the SBDC, the SBA, the WSBA. I use Chatham a ton. And so they have a wide variety of different things that you can, oftentimes when you look at them, initially I was looking at them and thinking like, this isn't for me, or this isn't something that I necessarily want to, that I have time to take. But it's been super valuable for us to have team members take some of the webinars, go to some of the sessions, and come back with notes for the team. I know for us right now, AI is, huge, and us kind of staying on top of what are people using AI in recruitment for? What are they using it in human resources? Where is it valuable? And so we have team members who just came back and talked on our team meeting. They did a 3-part session from, an AI conference that took place over 2 days. And then they came back and brought the high level information back to us. So sometimes doing some of those things too, and then making sure that you're giving your team opportunities where you can. So those can be opportunities to learn and grow, and they don't have to cost a ton of money. It can be something that is, free or readily available. So keeping an eye out for those things too.
Yeah. What do you see with, I don't know if you have the answer to this. So if you're trying to motivate your team, obviously everyone always thinks I got to pay them more. Like, what are things that you see actually motivating employees?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest thing that I'm seeing right now, and this is across large organizations and small, is oftentimes the capability to work hybrid or work remotely. So we're really seeing a huge flex of the capability to work remote or have some type of freedom in working. My team does work primarily remote. So I would say like 99%. And then sometimes we're on site at clients, or we'll have, one team member that is on site at a client, or we'll get together for team meetings. But there are a lot of people now that are being pushed back into the office. And so if you have the opportunity to give some flexibility, even if it's just one day from home, I would say that's a huge piece, because that gives people a little bit of flexibility if they have to run to a doctor's appointment in the morning and work late, or they need to kind of do something to shift their schedule. I think that 2020 and COVID really made people a lot more focused on their families and how important their families are. And so being able to have even just a little bit of flexibility. So flexibility is super valuable, especially from, a kind of a startup or smaller business standpoint. And then I think the other piece that's invaluable too is giving people the opportunity to have experience that they couldn't have gotten elsewhere. So it may be for us, it's the opportunity to work on multiple clients. So you may be working on a huge multinational organization, and then, your next project may be working with a smaller organization. And if you work just in one spot, like if you worked for a regular company, you wouldn't get that type of exposure. So I think being able to speak to that exposure of this is what you're doing today, but if we're successful, this is what we might be able to do tomorrow. And then the other piece too is tying bonuses for success. So if you are having a great year or great quarter, being able to kind of, give bonuses accordingly. And when you do that, when you structure it from a bonus standpoint, from a small business standpoint, if the following year isn't as good, you're not tied into that from a base salary. You're able to adjust accordingly. But then when you do have a good year, giving out bonuses accordingly.
Since you're remote, like we're remote too, what do you guys do to keep company culture when like nobody's working together?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just started towards the last quarter of last year. We started doing some in-person, mostly virtual meetings for our managers. And then we started to bring some of those to in-person. And we've seen a big difference with that. Just kind of meeting and collaborating and talking through some different things. And then we're working on some trainings for some of our team members that are actually starting in 2 weeks. And so coming up with some different trainings that we're going to be doing to pull more people together. We do a virtual monthly meeting that's kind of an update of what's going on within the business. It's a time for everyone to get together. And then we do a mix of those virtually and in person. So we do kind of a mix there depending on, I always say weather, because as you mentioned, we're in Pittsburgh. So in the winter, we often will do them more virtually. In the summer, we'll meet in person. And then we also do touch bases. Our managers do touch bases with their teams, typically bi-weekly. So it's just different ways for us to have different touch points and kind of keep in contact. I have had people that have said to me, like, how do you know that your person's working? Or they'll ask all these questions. And I'm like, if I'm really worried about if the person's working, then I probably hired the wrong person. And so, we hire people, we trust them, we give them a lot of autonomy and flexibility. And that's something that helps them to also have a great life as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, especially, micromanaging time stuff. Because it's hard when you're remote, especially if it's your first hire. Like I could see a lot of people like micromanaging it. And then like what I've found is it helps culture. We just have like a 15 to 30 minute call every morning with the team. Like everyone's on the same page. There's other people in the company like working together. It's not like you're standalone on an island. That kind of stuff seemed to help us.
No, it's super important. And I think too, like being able to kind of bounce ideas or hear other things are very important. And then also, a lot of times our teams will kind of buddy up. So if there's 4 people working on one client or 2 people working on one client, they typically touch base pretty frequently. And then, we also use Teams, which, a lot of people use, Google or Slack channels, et cetera. But those have also been very helpful as well.
So people can hire you guys and come to you if they need to find employees. And also, let's talk about HR for a little bit, because we came to you initially to hire employees. I never even thought about HR. And then it's like, okay, you got to have an HR department. Like what happens if there's an issue? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. As you're continuing to grow. So I would say the first piece to make sure that you kind of take a partner is for your first hire. So there's paperwork you want to make sure that you have in place. You want to make sure that you have, I typically say work with a payroll company, but you want to make sure that you have unemployment set up, you have workman's comp set up, you have the appropriate forms set up so that things kind of move smoothly in the event that you would have some type of audit. So usually I say take a partner on that kind of front end. A lot of people, when they hire their first employee, they don't necessarily have a handbook. I would recommend having a handbook as quickly as possible because it helps put those guardrails up. But I would say, definitely by the time you have like 4 or 5 employees, it's nice to have a handbook in place.
Or 10.
Or 10. That give those guide rails that say, this is what the expectation is for working. If you do work remotely, having a remote work policy is very important because then people know and understand, what is the expectation as we are working here. But then additionally, how do I ask for time off? Do I even have time off? It's all written out. One of the things that I also say is super important about a handbook is you want it to be readable. So we at one point had a client that came to us, they needed help with their handbook, and their handbook was 417 pages. And I wouldn't want to read that as an HR nerd, let alone someone who is an employee just trying to figure out if they can take time off. So making sure that it's readable, it's easy to use, they can flip through it pretty quickly, and they can go to it and say, hey, this is the information that I have and that I need. So we typically will help people get set up at whatever point that they are, but just getting some of those, guide rails in and then taking a look next at what do touch bases look like? Do we have a performance review policy? If someone has questions about, benefits or a policy, who do they go to? So we work with clients on a variety of different levels, all the way from, 10 hours a month up to we're almost full service with them. So it just kind of depends. The spot that we usually fit in is anywhere from, 0 to 5 employees all the way up to about 120. Once an organization's hit about 120, they typically need a full-time HR person to help with some of those things. But things are really important as you're onboarding people. It's important that they feel welcomed. It's important that they know, what are the policies? What do things look like? And that's important so you don't have people leaving quickly, because you don't want to spend all this time and effort to bring someone on just to have them leave quickly. And onboarding is a huge part of that.
Yeah. And even the handbook, like you're talking about, just gives clarity, because like we've been in business for a couple of years, but we brought you guys on as I guess you call it fractional HR.
Yep.
And we have a handbook now. So it's like, okay, everybody knows how much time they have that they can take off in PTO days. Everybody knows which holidays they're off, because it was before it's like, hey, you know what? Do we want to give everyone off or not? We always had to keep making these decisions all through the year, versus now it's just like everyone knows which holidays are off. Everyone knows whatever days they got. They know how to request them. They know what's acceptable, not acceptable. Basically, it lays everything out. It's like a roadmap.
It also gives the business the opportunity to hold people accountable. So the expectations are there. People know what is expected of them. And if you need to hold somebody accountable, you can always go back to the policies and procedures. And that's super helpful too.
And you guys made it easy too. So anyone listening, whether it's with Jess or somebody else, like work with a professional, because you can Google a handbook, things like that, but they actually customize it to us. And it was an easy lift for me. Like basically we have a conversation for an hour. They tell me everything I'm doing wrong. Then they come back and say, okay, here's the recommendations, but it's already written out. I just have to proofread it and we're done. Now we have a handbook for life. Like you only have to do it once.
Yeah. And the other thing too is once you have a handbook in place, if something changes, if something shifts, if you move from remote to hybrid, if you do something else, it's easy enough to change it. So I usually tell people, you don't want to be changing the handbook every month because the wind has, kind of shifted. But, each year, if you take a look at it and say like, hey, you know what, this doesn't necessarily fit anymore. We want to change it. And then you obviously want to re-roll it out to your team, or just at least make them aware of, what has changed. But you have that opportunity to do that.
And there's some things even on the HR side you wouldn't even know. Like some states you have to have specific papers submitted to the government checking people's backgrounds or saying they can work in the US, things like that I would never know. Most people don't. So it pays to work with someone that's in this space.
And there's a lot that goes on in California. So that's one state that we always kind of say, if you're moving into that state, you have to kind of tread lightly, make sure that you have all of the information there, because there are a lot of guidelines around how many hours you can work, if how you're paying overtime, et cetera. So it is nice to have somebody to just kind of double check that. And then a lot of things are state by state. So if you think about, Pennsylvania, we have, the local tax codes that are, based on where you live, and you have to enter in the certain code, make sure it's in payroll correctly. We have that in PA, but Ohio doesn't have that. But then in Ohio, unemployment or workman's comp goes through the state, whereas in Pennsylvania, you can go through a broker. And so it's all of these little details that are on a state by state basis. And also, kind of determining what states do I currently work in? Do I want to go into another state? Do I want to stay where I am? And what does that look like? We had one client who someone picked up and moved and didn't tell them, and then said, here's my new address. And it was in a new state, and they had to get registered. They had to do the whole process that could have been done ahead of time, but the person just kind of up and moved. So working through a lot of those things as well that sometimes you wouldn't think of, or an employee wouldn't think of. They just think, oh, my spouse got a job somewhere else, and now I want to go ahead and move over there. And they don't even say anything until they're there. So it's never a dull moment in HR.
Yeah, I'm with you too. And then the last thing before we go too, one benefit that I see is I feel more comfortable now, because if there is an issue, they can bring it to me and I can pass it to someone that knows how to answer it. Because in the HR space, like you got to make sure you handle things properly. Like you can get in big trouble, I believe, if you handle it improperly. And I don't know the right ways, but you guys do.
Well, and it's nice to have an additional kind of set of ears and eyes on things, because the way that business was done even like 10 years ago is a little bit different than it is now. And it's also nice for an employee to have someone that is kind of more of an impartial party, that if something's going on, they can come to us and say, hey, this is what's happening. What do you think that we can do about this? And you have someone that's other than the business owner to go to and kind of buffer some of those conversations.
If somebody wanted to work with you and reach out, like, what's the best way to connect?
You can certainly look for me online. It's just Jessica Eberley on LinkedIn. You can connect with us on HRT Solutions or Equality Careers, or you can reach out to us on our site, which is hrtsolutions.net, or you can reach out to me via email. So there's multiple ways to get in touch with me and learn more about what we do. We also do a lot of partnership with Chatham Center for Women's Entrepreneurship, and you can work with us there as well.
Stuff. Hey, Jess, what's your favorite book?
So this is going to be ridiculous because it's not a business book, but I actually just bought a friend. When I was a kid, I absolutely loved Berenstain Bear books. And I actually just bought my friend a Berenstain Bear book. She's in the hospital and it's going to be from her kid. It's called I Love You, Mama. So that's the first one that kind of pops into my head from a child's book standpoint. I also Atomic Habits. I feel like that's a pretty standard book that people like, but building on different everyday habits, I feel like is so incredibly important. So that's another good book that I like as well.
So go out and read Berenstain Bears or Atomic Habits, right?
Or both, if you have kids, both at the same time.
That's right. Hey, Jess, thanks for coming on. This was fun.
Thanks for having me.
All right, hey, everyone, thanks for listening. Until next time, get out there, crush it, close some deals. We'll see you guys.
Thank you.